Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ, where we explore the intersection of AI, human potential, and the future of work. Recently, I sat down with Navy veteran, executive coach, writer, and documentary filmmaker Mike Schindler to discuss how humans can thrive in an AI driven world and to hear all about his various endeavors, including a new book, documentary, and podcast, all called The Rise of Humanness, in partnership with award-winning writer and filmmaker Chris Nolan. Mike brings a unique perspective to the human centricity conversation, emphasizing the need for self awareness, adaptability, and human centered leadership in times of rapid technological change. We cover everything from VUCA environments, that is, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the non futurists out there, to the changing education landscape, to the rise of human value and creativity in the age of AI. Mike is a super smart and interesting guy who is doing amazing work, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure you will too. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mike Schindler. How you doing this morning, Mike?
I am doing great. Thanks. Good to be here.
Thanks so much for spending some time with me. And you've got a fascinating background, so I won't do it justice. I'll just
Yeah.
hand it over to you and let you give a proper intro to yourself.
Give the proper intro. Bob, I'll tell you that I think I should aspire to be like president, right? Because then you could just come on a show and just say, "Hey, I'm the president," right? And everybody's like, well, "It doesn't matter your background now,"
Right.
I'm third generation Navy. Joined the Navy, did some cool things in the Navy. Kind of developed a philanthropic effort around that, just helping people identify mission, purpose, identity when they get out. Like, what does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be human? Almost a decade ago, I got connected with my business partner in Hollywood, Chris, and talk about a divine appointment. I think, Bob, we just hit it off, and I started co-writing, and I started co-producing, and I started getting really into the film side of the business and producing documentaries. And so I get to sit in two worlds where I get to help people one-on-one or in group settings, and also produce film content, movies that inspire people. And so my biggest accomplishment, though, are my two daughters. So I got to say that out of all the other stuff, those two are just amazing.
I know how you feel as a girl dad myself. I just have one, but yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely agree. So some of the current work, you guys have a book coming out and a movie
we
coming
do.
out, right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
talk a little bit
yeah.
about both of those.
Actually, we have three movies that are in pre-production right now. One is called Climate of Hope: How Cities Are Saving the World. The other one is The Next Moonshot, and that's all about the elevation or the evolution, rather, of transportation, what's going on in the United States. And then the one that we're most excited about, well, I don't want to say most excited. I mean, those other two projects are amazing, but is The Rise of Humanness in the Age of AI. And when Chris and I, when we did a film called Look Up Now, and it's a short documentary that people can actually watch on YouTube. Shot that over in Europe, and that is all about AI, this crossroads between humans and AI. Like, where are we? What direction are we going to go? When our book came out in November, The Rise of Humanness, Expanding Human Value in the Age of AI, Bob, actually, we had to do a rewrite of that book like 5 times because industry was changing so quickly. And I look at it now, and that book it's been out, what, 4 months? The principles of the book, because we talk about human value, are solid. Like, you could read that book 20 years from now, and a lot of that stuff would still be relevant. Some of the tech that we talk about in the book, not so much. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
That's always the danger of putting something in print, right?
Yeah.
Took you a while to sort of finalize it, even well before it was published, and things are changing at an unbelievable pace. So I don't think anyone's going to hold you
Yeah.
at, at fault at fault for not having the latest and greatest, because it would have changed, 2 days after you
Yeah.
went to print anyway.
Yeah.
So no, really, really exciting. So talk a little bit about just thematically about the Rise of Humanists, the movie that's coming
Yeah.
out, the documentary, and its relationship to some of the core principles around just how fast and disruptive change
Yeah.
is influencing us. This VUCA concept and your VUCA Max
Yeah.
concept within that.
Yeah. So, I mean, VUCA, so when we did that documentary in 2020, the world had experienced a huge pandemic, right? I mean, the whole world shut down. And that is what we call a VUCA environment, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, which has been around since the beginning of time. And it's a military methodology, or it's really an acronym that it developed out of the Army War College, seeded by two leadership experts. And so when we developed the film, It's VUCA, The Secret to Living in the 21st Century, it was really, that effort was to help people have a roadmap of how to navigate uncertain times. And honestly, Bob, when that movie came out, Chris and I are both like, man, this is kind of a short window because, the pandemic's going to be over and things are going to go back to normal. It'll be different, but, probably normal. And life is not normal, right? I mean, things are rapidly changing so quickly. And so what we realized through that whole thing is that's how our executive leadership company formed, that went global, something that we didn't expect, to be honest with you, because, I mean, granted, I've been coaching and working with our military for close to two decades now. But, I was leaning into the filmmaking side. Now all of a sudden I'm, back into the coaching side, and we're really helping people navigate these times. The human piece, Bob, and this, is in this age of AI, where there's new AI tools that are happening every day, essentially. Like, if you got to stay up on it, right?
Yep.
Is we realize that we need to teach people how to be human again. Because for the last 100 years, we've been teaching people how to be robots, right? Like, there's a box and there's a task inside that box. We're going to put a human inside that box, and that human is going to perform that task. And, they're going to punch the clock. They're going to go out, and we're not really tapping you for your creativity. We're tapping you for your ability to perform a task. And now with AI, those can perform those tasks, and people are freaking out. They're like, wait a second, I'm used to being a robot. And we're like, no, 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 we're going to help pull the creator out of you, because that's really what you're designed to do. And that's really the whole point of the next film, The Rise of Humanness, is to show these cool stories of how humans really have power and authority over the technology. You just have to take that seat and understand how to, in many ways, be a generalist. And where you need to be an expert is in who you are. Like, who are you? Because that is how you're going to use technology to expand human value in this era.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point that hasn't fully sunk in with a lot of people because they're still trying to absorb all of it, not just the volume and the breadth of impact, but the speed, to your point,
Mm-hmm.
at which it's hitting us, and the expectations, the knee-jerk reactions, the battle in some ways of what should humans be doing versus what automation and AI should be doing. And I think, I mean, this is all tied to why I care so much about AI literacy and AI readiness, because this is not just about, do I know how to, ask a question into a
Yeah.
generative AI assistant. This is about, what are the things that make sense for me to continue doing. And to your point, if I was already doing things that were sort of robotic in a
Yeah.
way, whether that's a digital task or a physical task, how do I best position myself for my own growth, my own prosperity, my own personal and professional development, working in concert with AI? Because I think this is what it comes down to. This is not, a Terminator, scenario, at least not yet. Let's keep our
Not
fingers
yet.
crossed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is not a zero sum game. This is, we're going to work together, and we're going to bring out what makes us human by having the AI do things that, yes, we've done them traditionally, but do we need to? Do we want to? Is that the best use of our time, of our abilities, of our creativity? And so I think some of this ties back to something that you mentioned when we spoke before around like self-awareness
Yeah.
and being able to understand yourself enough to know how best to position yourself and how to apply some of your innate skills and abilities to thrive going forward. So I thought maybe you could sort of unpack on
Yeah.
that.
Well, and I think what people need to really understand, and this is something that we do in some of our trainings, Bob, is I'll walk through a room and I go, I want you to write this down. So everybody pulls out a piece of paper and said, I want you to write down your last name. And everybody kind of confused, right? Like, what are we going to throw this in a bucket and he's going to pick, a winner or something? But I'm like, write down your last name. And I want you to really think about, what does it mean to defend your last name? What does that mean? What does that mean to defend your last name? What does it mean to be you? Right? Because oftentimes, we carry around this last name and we don't oftentimes think, like, what does it mean? Like, I've got a last name Schindler, right? There's some weight that carries with that name. There was a lot of expectation that I put on me, not that my family put on me, but that I put on me to live up to it and exceed it and be someone that adds value, right? So I did a lot of soul searching when I got later, not as a kid. As a kid, I was lost like everybody else. But when we write down our last name and we think, well, what does it mean to be me? Well, how do I get to that spot? And this is the thing that we teach is one of the things that we teach is clarity. How do you get to that clarity? Like, what does it mean to have your best day mentally? What does it mean to have your best day physically, spiritually, relationally, financially? Like, if you're on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being amazing, 1 being like, I can barely pick my head up off the pillow, what does it mean for you to be an 8 in that area? Like, define that. And when you start to define that, you realize you begin to go, wow, this is who I am. And now when you look at tools, we say this in the AI world, right? There's tools, there's trust, and there's self, right? And everybody's so focused on the tool. Oh, the latest and greatest tool. This is amazing. But they don't know how to discern the tool. They don't know if the information that they're getting is 100% accurate. They don't know how oftentimes the answers may or may not align, be in congruence with who they are, or is it out of congruence, right, with who they are? And the only way you know that is by understanding self. So when you define what it means to be an 8 in those areas, mind, body, spirit, relationships, finances, all of a sudden your world opens up because you see the world through that lens. And then when you incorporate tools, you go, these tools will help me become a better version of me.
Had me thinking about something I was reading recently. There was an author that has a book. It was all about, how do we, extract and make people realize, just where their strengths truly lie. And in the context of AI, he had almost 3 categories or subcategories of readiness. One was AI ready, which I think talks to what we were just alluding to, and some of the AI literacy pieces. There's the human ready
Yeah.
piece. Do we know ourselves? Do we know what us, collectively, not just individually, but as a team, et cetera, what we need to do to bring out our best selves? And then the third was being change ready. So AI
Mm,
ready, human ready, and
yep.
change ready. So are we
Yeah.
ready, to your point, around like this changing landscape? How do we prepare ourselves? So I imagine you've heard a lot of feedback from the veterans that you work with, where you need to hit and talk about all of those things, right?
Well, you do. And that's the flip side of VUCA, right? I talked about the negative side, or what we call below the line, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That's the external factors. Can't change those. Those are going to happen in life no matter what, right? You can train for them. You just don't necessarily know when they're going to happen. The flip side to that is vision, understanding, clarity, and adaptability. And I think one thing that people are going to have to really embrace is the adaptability part, because life is changing so quickly. I mean, you think about NVIDIA, here, this major chip maker, right? Huge value in the marketplace. Everybody's like, nobody can compete with these guys. Maybe AMD, maybe some of these, DeepSeek comes out. And
Yeah.
whether or not it's true that they built this technology for $5 million, I mean, as one of my friends said, when did we start trusting what China said? But it, who cares? That's the perception. And overnight, NVIDIA loses $600 billion in market share overnight, one day. And so when you think about how fast industry can change, no matter the industry, I think what Harvard came out with a study that said, listen, the half-life or the shelf life, the half-life of any job is less than 5 years. And I would argue it's probably less than 2 years by how quickly things are changing, right, Bob? So we as humans have to be adaptable. We have that capability, no question, because when you look at it, we were pioneers. We were pioneers. I mean, go back to the beginning of time. We wandered deserts. We explored new territories. We adapted based on weather and environment and things that we faced. And we didn't know what things we would face on a day-to-day basis, right? And so we have to redevelop that part of our brain to understand that life is going to change. And the beauty of that is I get to grow through that change.
Hey, it's Libby DeLucian. If you're sick of business advice that sounds cute but doesn't actually move the needle forward, this one's for you. The Libby DeLucian podcast is where we go one layer deep. No gurus, no glitter, just straight up unfiltered talk about scaling a business, running a household, and holding on to your sanity in the middle of the chaos. If you're the bottleneck in your business or in your own life, I'll show you how to fix it. Simple, tactical, and one layer deep every time. Let's go. Visit libbyd.com and check out our podcast today.
So no matter the change, that's good, because that is going to pull something out of me that I know is already there. And that, I think, is the point of humanness when Chris and I talk about human value and humanness and the 10 different intelligences that we bring, right? Emotional intelligence and social intelligence and even acute awareness, right? That sixth sense that we have, that ability to be Captain Kirk in moments that logically it doesn't make sense. Like we should go this direction, and yet we do a Captain Kirk hunch move, right? And we're like, I'm not doing that. And all of logic says you need to do that. And you're like, no, I'm not doing that. AI never would have told the Wright brothers, hey, I think, yeah, it's a good idea that you should, build a plane and fly, like two bicycle guys, right? Like,
Right.
AI is going to be like, yeah, that's dumb. And these guys are like, we're doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're yet to see, I am yet to see AI that really takes into account. This is part of, sort of training these agents to sort of think like you and weigh potential, outcomes, because you've got to understand the risk profile of people. And I don't know, I think we're getting into artificial general intelligence and maybe even artificial super intelligence, where it's trying to absorb all that makes us human and think like us. I mean, those are some of the scarier thoughts. But the VUCA concept, I just don't think enough people have thought about it. I mean, my exposure to it is, I don't have a military background. My exposure to it is through like futurism and strategic sort of forecasting, where you say, well, if we're going to do scenario planning, we've got to think deeply about things that might have a low probability and an even lower probability when you think about the intersection of or the confluence of multiple, low probability, future events. But the probability is not zero, right?
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
any pandemic, the pandemic, it might have caught us off guard. DeepSeek might have caught us off guard, but it's not a black swan event. It wasn't, these things weren't unknowable.
That's
right.
right.
And so
That's
I think
right.
the average person just doesn't think about that. I don't mean that in a sort of derogatory way. It's just not something that you've been exposed to. And so it's just this unknown.
But that's the opportunity, right, Bob? I mean, when we think about, people are so enamored by the tools. The tools are important, but they're going to change every couple months, right? I mean, they're going to continue to improve. They're going to continue to get greater. The VUCA piece is a framework. That's why companies bring us in, is because oftentimes they're looking for a framework. Like, okay, we know that we have internal and external issues, right? Internal issues, half the time people don't understand what their purpose is inside the company, except to be a taskmaster, right? Like, this is the task that I own. Companies are going to have to evolve over time quickly, like now, like not next month, but you got to start now in identifying the people inside your company that can help take you to the next level. So it's really identifying that moonshot. Like, what do we want to do as a company? Like, what's our goal? Certainly they've got financial goals. Certainly they've got impact goals. What are those? And now you take your people together and you go, okay, some of you guys are frontline. You see this stuff every day. How would you help us get to this next level? Right? Pull that creativity out of your people. That's a trust factor. And if leadership is not willing to pull that information out of their people, then I would encourage leadership to say, well, then do you have the right people? Right? So AI is designed to push back on some of those creative ideas. I believe that's how we use it, and get us to think differently about something. AI can help you start to see around corners, but you've got to have the ability to discern whether or not that information is true. Or AI will be like C3PO half the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, it totally wants to please you, and sometimes it makes mistakes, and you got to know when it's making mistakes.
Yeah. I'm correlating that thought back to what you said before about like the way jobs are changing so fast and things like that. And it's not just jobs are changing fast. And I think you're on point. Like, year and a half, 2 years, I think 5 years is way too long, especially with what we're seeing now. But that's also happens to be approximately what the average tenure is for folks, at any job. And so whatever those reasons are, they're bored, they're not, learning enough, they're not getting paid enough, whatever it is, when you post a job, that you have an open role, it's another reason why this like sort of matching exercise between a resume and a job description is insufficient to move an organization forward in a H2, H3 kind of horizon. First of all, you have to know going in, think about the investment you're making in recruiting and talent acquisition, and what the payoff is if the average tenure is only a year and a half, 2 years. So you're spending a lot of energy and time and resources to find folks who aren't necessarily going to stick around that long. But also, are you really looking for the right folks? Because if you want them to stick around and you want them to guide you, guide your strategy, right? Building the talent strategy that influences your business and technology strategy. These people have to be adaptable, and they have to think longer term than just, can I execute the tasks, that we need done over the next, quarter, 2 quarters, or whatever. So I think this all ties together between, being AI ready, but even more than that, just in general, having the capacity to grow and learn and make the necessary adjustments as the market changes, as technology changes. I think it's all this vicious cycle.
And that's why it's so important to know self, right? Because if you're looking at any opportunity, any job, any contract, any financial opportunity, and you're like, oftentimes we make decisions. I certainly did this earlier in my career, is I would make decisions based off of money, right? And arguably that's what the majority of people do is, oh, you know what, I can do that job. I'm going to take that job if I can get that job because it pays me enough money. And then they get into it and they realize, why am I so miserable? Like, you look at the Gallup poll, and close to well over 50%. I think the numbers are even as high as 70% of people are just miserable in their jobs, right? They're just like punching a clock and can't wait for Saturday. And when you think about that, like, that's not why you're here. So the importance of understanding self, like, if I were to take this job, how does it feed the eights in my life? How does it feed me mentally? How does it feed me spiritually, relationally, financially, right? You've got to ask yourself those questions. And then what happens is that becomes a best culture fit. So if you're a company, you're looking for people that fit your culture, because you're like, hey, we're getting ready to change the world, Bob. And how we change the world is probably going to look very different in the next 6 months. So even though I'm telling you that right now your job is to build rocket boosters, I'm going to tell you that could change in the next 6 months. But the mission doesn't change. The mission is, we're going to change the world. So are you on board with helping me change the world? And that's, I think, where companies have to get back to, is when they're interviewing, people for their companies, is, here's our moonshot. This is where we're going. That's what the military was really good about. It was like, Mike, your purpose in the world is to help save the world from bad people. Well, I can get on board with that, right? Now, your mission might change, Mike. Just understand the mission is commander's intent. That will likely change. Your purpose doesn't change, but your mission is probably going to change. And your identity is probably going to change a little bit too, right? Because you're going to have to evolve over time. Not who you are, but just the taskers that you'll do, right? I might call you a field engineer one day, and all of a sudden now you're a AI bot maker or something, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, but don't get wrapped up in your identity, because that'll change. Your identity needs to be true self. It's a great book. It was by a monk. He wrote this book, and he talked about, the whole journey of life is to get back to your true self, who you were before you were born. And I thought that was so profound when you really think about it that way. Like, who was I before I was born? His whole point is we put on a persona, right? When we're born, people pour into us and we begin to adopt different personas. And that's the danger of AI if people do not understand who they are. And they just go, well, AI is just going to, I'll just follow whatever it says. Well, geez, why? Why not be a creator? Right.
This is part of, like you said, it's part of the self-awareness, but I also think about our daughters and just students more broadly, who are trying to figure out what they want to do and where they want to go to school and what they want to study. And if they haven't gotten any AI exposure other than, using something on their phone, but not getting any actual training on how to use it properly or when to use it, when not to use it. But more broadly, I just see the majority of folks just following this still pretty linear path and still linear way of thinking. Like, this is how my life needs to go. It needs to go up this path. My parents, have these expectations. All my friends are going to school, and it's like, if you start doing that sort of self exploration in the context of AI and look at some of the signals that we get from, whether it's the Gallup polls. I mean, if I showed my daughter the Gallup polls, it'd say most people are like hate their job, looking for another job this year, staying just to put food on the table. Like, for kids that really think deeply about that, it's like, why am I on this road?
Yeah.
Right? Let me carve my own path, or let me start to think about ways in which I can leverage my innate, skills, my creativity, my curiosity, and how do I explore these things, looking far past, how much I get compensated. But I think this goes back to, individuality and understanding that that's where your value going forward will be realized. And I just think kids would start to think a lot differently, at least upperclassmen in high school, like my daughter, and then into college or whatever. But you're following this path because your authority figures are sort of guiding you in this direction. But, the sky's the limit, right? And so you've got to really
100%.
understand, like, all the things that you're capable of, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I guess we need, as IBM used to call them, we need more wild ducks.
Yeah, well, yeah. What an opportunity for wild ducks too, because there's going to be new industries that are developed in the next couple months, in the next year, in the next 2 years, things that we didn't even really think about. Although I will say that if you have ever watched Star Trek, you can see where we're going, or even the Jetsons for that matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, you go back and look at the stuff that we produced years and years ago, and you go, wow, if I'd only just kind of followed that, like, that's where things are going. If people want to know where could we go, look at what Hollywood produces in sci-fi movies. We can go there. If you can imagine it, we can develop it, we can produce it, we can make it happen. I think for our youth, you raise a really good point, and that's the reason why we really start with write down your last name. What does it mean to be your last name? What does that mean to you? And these kids, it's a concept that they'll wrestle with because they're like, I don't know what it means. I mean, this is what my dad tells me. This is what happens. I mean, I don't even know, right? It could conjure up some things where you've got to have some guidance in this exercise, because it could take people down a very dark path, right? If they're like carrying the weight of, family issues, right? So there's a great question that we'll ask. It's so simple, but if people would just ask themselves this one question, okay, if I could do anything in the world that would pick my head up off the pillow, what is it? Such a simple question. But we frame the things we do oftentimes because we're so worried about what people will think about what we're doing. And my argument is, who cares? Like, seriously, your goal should be, if you've got a family, your goal should be like, hey, listen, it is our family. This is our core group. This is our tribe. This is what we do. We have a good time. I've oftentimes joked with Chris. I'm like, Chris, at some point I'm going to own like a speakeasy. I'm going to own, it's just going to be like a Great Gatsby thing. We're going to pull in jazz music. It's going to be so funny. He's like, really, you want to do that? Look at the margins. We get down into the business roots of things. I love what I do, but I also love that you can create things today, especially if you're youth. I would challenge those who are in high school, early to late teens to early to, mid 20s, is ask yourself, like, if I could create anything, what is it? What would I create if I could do this? And run with it. And throw it into ChatGPT or DeepSeek or something and just play with it and say, hey, listen, push back on this idea. What are the things that I got to consider? What are the things because that'll pull the creativity out of the individual. That's what I believe AI is really good at, is giving you a sparring partner to some degree.
No, I also think when you're in a position where you're trying to do workforce planning or you're doing talent acquisition and you're evaluating people, maybe your college admissions, officer or whatever, certainly I need to learn more about the latter if my daughter gets ready to apply next year. But
yeah.
But you've got to think about these things with a sort of empathetic perspective as well, in terms of not just being self-aware and literate for yourself, which is obviously critical, but as you think about other people and as you're trying to figure out people's skills and potential to succeed in a job or potential to succeed and be a valuable contributor on campus to a college or whatever, you've got to think about what we used to just simply call someone who's well-rounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who is not just a good student. They're not just good at they're not just a good test taker. They're not just a good studier for certain tests and whatever, but they contribute. Obviously, they look for volunteer opportunities. They look for leadership, exhibits signs of leadership through sports or clubs and things like that. But I think curiosity goes a long way. I think overcoming adversity, all these things need to be taken into account. And I just think everyone needs to think more deeply about what success really looks like and what value could potentially be generated, no matter how you're sort of evaluating humans, because humans are not hopefully going away, and AI needs to continue to sort of augment us. I mean, this is part of the human centricity, and in my mind, part of the humanness that you and Chris espouse is all the advancements in technology should all be in an effort to increase, what makes us, human, and be human centric, not AI centric.
That's the battle that's going on, right? Because companies develop tools because they want to sell the tools, right? It's a widget. And so it's all about profitability. Damn everything else, right? Well, how's this going to impact humans? Well, we don't care. Right now, there's Jamie Gorman, who's with Arizona State University. He's got a big DARPA contract. We've been studying this. His argument is, and I believe he's correct in this, honestly, is humans are a closed system. AI is a closed system. Companies are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars taking this closed system, AI, and overlaying it on humans. And humans, there's a 10 to 15% adoption rate because we're like resistant, right? We're immune to change. We don't like change. Like, But when you think about people, do they really embrace change? Like, hey, guess what? We're going to change. And people are like, yes, let's change. They're like, no, I like my routine. I got my little thing going on. And they're studying this at ASU, which is so profound, and saying, how do we integrate, right? So that AI is honestly an extension of the human. So if it's an extension of the human, then what that means is the human has to understand who the human is first. So in companies, when you go into companies, and this is where our youth really need to grab onto this message, is your ability to go into a company and lean into their moonshot. What is their moonshot? What is their impact? What is their big idea? And if you can lean into that, then you'll adapt, because when the vision is big, the circumstances don't matter. And that's the challenge that we're seeing in the marketplace, even in education. We're still teaching a 19th century model in our educational system. And yet industries are changing rapidly. So I get a business degree. Let's say I go into college and I want to be a business major. Okay. So that professor has got to be changing curricula every quarter. How many professors are changing their curricula every quarter? How many institutions are set up where they can adapt that quickly to the marketplace? Not many, right? So are we doing a disservice to our youth to say, hey, your job is to finish high school, do really well, go to college now, because, you need to go to college. Why do I need to go to college? Like, I get it if you're in medicine or you're a lawyer or some of this thing, right? I mean, I get it. There's some professions that you absolutely do, but why can't I just say, what does it mean to be your last name? Number one. Number two, what's going to pick your head up off the pillow? And as parents, we got to be okay if they say, you know what, I just want to be a bartender in Costa Rica.
Optimize your business with a Workforce AI Edge powered by Vizier. Make smarter decisions and achieve better outcomes with real-time AI insights delivered to every people leader. Explore more at visier.com.
Oh, man. All right. Well, you know what? Costa Rica, what a pleasure. Costa Rica, I'll be able to come visit. I'm sure you'll be able to make really good drinks at some point. And you know what? Maybe there's a period in their life that that's what they choose. And then they go on and they go, you know what? I had this brilliant idea sitting around the bar. Now, am I advocating that? Not necessarily, but if somebody chooses that, who am I to say, hey, no, I'm not going to encourage that, because maybe that's part of your story that pulls out why you're here and what you're going to create.
As much as that sounds appealing, I would point out that how far do you think we are from a robot bartender?
Well, let me tell you why I think, sure. I mean, the Jetsons, I think, even had that, right? Where they had robot bartenders. But
Probably.
Why do people go to the bars, Bob? They go to the bars for the human connection, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're always going to have the bartenders of the world, because in many ways, they're also the therapist. Right? Guys saddle up, they pull that chair up, they pull the stool up, and they sit there and they go, oh man, I just tell you about my job, my relationship, my whatever, whatever it is. And the bartender's like, yep, no, I totally get it. And so people go for human connection. And I think what we're going to find in this age of AI is, as we begin to infuse more tools, I believe both men and women are going to find more opportunities to get together. We've not seen that. I think I said this on a previous show. I said, what's interesting is, with the emergence of social media, we became less social as humans. We did, because all of a sudden it clicked into the part of our brain where we went, well, I'm not worthy. Oh, I don't have that. Oh, right, this comparison factor. Oh boy. Look, they're doing these big major events. I do believe we're in a transition period where, and I would encourage this to all your listeners, is yes, love the tools, know the tools, train up on the tools, be aware of those tools. Ask yourself, how are you going to discern what's right, with the information that you're getting back? Like, are you going to be curious enough to dive deep and push back on those answers? And who does it mean to be you? And this is a time to really explore your purpose, that relational purpose, which is, who are you surrounding yourself in your life? Not just across the video screen, but in your circle that you can give and add value to, and they can give and add value to you. That, I think, is going to be even more prominent, more necessary. I'm praying, Bob, that we go back to like Remember the dinner parties that our parents used to host? At least my parents
Yeah.
did, right? They used to
Yeah.
have these little dinner parties, and their friends would come over, and sometimes they'd play games. And I would encourage people to go back to that. Go find your dinner party friends. I don't know, that played Cards Against Humanity or Monopoly or whatever you want, right? Like,
No, I agree. I think some of it is around let's forget about these like routine, you know, automatable tasks or
yeah,
whatever. I mean, I think for people, some of the aspects that people are scared about is losing their own agency, right? In the age of
yeah,
AI agents, are we maintaining our own agency and autonomy for the things that are important to us, the things that drive meaning and value in our lives, personally and professionally? So I think that's really important. Mike, when you go about your work, whether it's writing and filmmaking, I'm curious, just in the creative process and the teams that you work with. I mean, on the creative side, do you see, or are you getting feedback from your teams around how this is all impacting more creative pursuits?
it's certainly changing industry, in a big way. How we develop movies, how we not only, the technology that we can use, how we can edit film, how we can, all that is changing rapidly, right? Even the editing tools. I mean, the things that you would spend a fortune on to edit, now you can do that for a fraction of the cost, right? So you can produce more content. When we're writing scripts, oftentimes we'll have an idea and we'll use one of our specially trained bots, and we'll throw the script in there, and we'll have it evaluate, right? And then sometimes it'll come back with some ideas, and we'll be like, oh, that's a really good idea, but we need to twist that idea, right? So what is it doing? It's like back in the day when you'd have the cigars and you'd be in a smoke-filled room and you're sitting there pitching a script, and you're like, people are bantering back and forth on, I think we should do it this way. AI just becomes another teammate. And we treat it as a teammate, and now we have to trust it as a teammate. And that's the discernment part. And so, do I think that you're going to see movies that are developed by AI? Well, of course you are, but are they going to be that good? Probably not, because they're going to miss the little human elements, the little nuances that we pick up in film, right? AI misses all those. Will it ever get to the point where it picks up the nuances? I don't know, maybe. I doubt it, though, because, we have that sixth sense. And the good movies pick that up. The good movies, I don't want to disparage anything out there, but we all kind of know, we've all seen the Hallmark Christmas movies, right? We're all like, hey, same script, different characters, slightly different change, but not much, right? That is AI when it comes to filmmaking. I mean, we see it, but we don't fear it. I mean, I think some do, but Chris and I we don't fear it.
I agree with, as far as like human storytelling, there's just certain elements that you just can't replicate in a sort of automated, AI generated way. And I hope that remains true. I definitely see it as a collaborator, because maybe there are little nuggets of things that you hadn't thought about, but overall, the storytelling needs to be innately human, so that you can evoke,
100%.
the emotion and the reaction that you expect, and the relatability of some of the stories. Yeah, so I hope none of that goes away. But you're right. I mean, if people are going to use it to just crank out, straight to video,
Yeah.
kind of, movies,
Yeah.
formulaic, following certain patterns or whatever. If you're just trying to fill up your streaming, catalog with stuff like that, I mean, best of luck.
Well, that'll be short-sighted because people will pick up
Yeah.
on it. They might think it's cool to begin with,
Yeah.
right? There's some great AI tools where this, you can capture 30 seconds of somebody's voice. You can get a lot of the inflection points in their voice. You can write a whole script. You can, there's tools out there where I can walk and talk, and I can pump a new script into that, and it looks like I'm still saying, right? I don't have to reshoot video, but people are picking up on that. And we have to remember, as humans, we love the authenticity, right? And that, I think, is going to be even more pronounced. We might be at a tipping point where we finally understand that these agentics, these different tools streamline our life, and we'll be able to go back to authentic relationships. And that's really my hope. That's like when people ask, what's your big vision? My big vision is people really understand what it means to be human again. I get it. We've been trained as robots for 100 years.
And I think that, again, it applies to not just, talent from a, workforce perspective. I mean, I think, look, I mean, we're all spending too much time on our devices, whether that's,
Yeah.
we're actually doing stuff work related or not, but the focus and the attention and the mindless doom scrolling, as they call it, or whatever. It's just goes back to finding content that's meaningful and making sure that we maintain human connection. I see this a lot, just community engagement, that people really are, if they're picking their heads up and paying attention, and again going back to the self-awareness sort of concept, they're craving in-person meetings and communal atmosphere, and community. The word community is almost a misnomer in some of these cases, right? Because you don't get a sense that you can share anything you want, or you're all necessarily on the same, working towards the same objective, or I don't know. There's just something at this point. It's like fun, and because it's like a novelty to get to meet people. But that's why I like personally going to some of these conferences and events or whatever. Sometimes they can be overwhelming, but I like the local meetups. I'm going to one actually two in the city in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to both of them. And that's me as this sort of introverted guy who's sitting in here in his home office quite a bit, but it gives you like this renewed sort of burst of energy and creativity and excitement about what we can do together, because there are so many people that are starting to think that way, and it's just good to meet those folks and see eye to eye.
Well, humans were designed to be in relationship, right? And relationship beyond technology. I would argue that that's not necessarily a relationship. You might have 15,000 online friends, but how many of them really know you, right? Like, and when people are like, well, how do I even get started? I'm like, go pick a friend, any friend that you have, call them up and say, hey, let's do coffee, tea, beer, whatever. Like, let's go take a walk. Just get that human connection. Because when you look at purpose, when you look at and you break down purpose and you go, okay, there's 4 levels of purpose. There's spiritual purpose. There's social purpose. There's relational purpose. And then there's sacrificial purpose. If you've not clearly defined those areas for your life, right, you'll be incongruent. You'll be out of alignment. And that's where people struggle. That's why, and then that's when they begin to isolate. And I think, to your point, Bob, this is an opportunity for people to get back into human-to-human connection, that type of relationship, understanding that, there's going to be magic that happens over that coffee table, right? Or in that coffee shop, or in that pub, or wherever you choose to meet, or walking along the park, whatever. That is the age of AI, I truly believe. I believe that these AI tools will probably force us back into better relationships as humans, because we will want for that. We'll hunger for that. So I think it's an opportunity. I think the rise of humanness is geez, I just say keep producing the tools. Keep producing the tools, because it makes our work that Chris and I do and others that are in our field, it makes us even more relevant, because we're teaching people how to be human again.
We could talk for so much longer about some of these topics.
Totally.
I love the work that you're doing. I can't wait for this movie to come out, Rise of Humanness, and it's coming out soon, right?
It'll be, yeah. Well, we're having to develop and redevelop some parts, but yeah, it'll be out here soon. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we will put all appropriate links in the show notes for this episode. But really fascinating work that you guys are doing. Thank you for all that you do for our veterans. Thank you for your service. And this has been fantastic, Mike. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Bob.
And that concludes another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.